Hello and welcome. Happy Earth Day. My name is Carol Carter, and I am the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are dedicated to creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, underrepresented talent, all kinds of diversity, any way you can define it, into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. We're really honored to be with you today on Earth Day and this Earth Week. And this is part 2 of a session called How Environmental Justice and Equity Can Help Solve the Climate Crisis. We have some incredible leaders who are gathered here today. And this is the first week of essentially our 10-week virtual conference. So we hope that you'll join us, whether you're seeing this live or you're watching the recorded session. And we'll go through the 3rd week of June. We also invite students that you work with and other people who value these topics and don't see as much of the diversity, maybe in some of the people who are teaching them, that these are wonderful role models that your students can plug into and benefit from. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce AJ Grant, who was the leader in this category for energy sustainability, the Inclusive Leader Award winner last year for Global Minded. It's how we really met AJ. And she's taken her leadership really seriously and been a big part of putting together these incredible people who you're about to spend this next hour and change with. So AJ and everyone, welcome. So glad you all are here. Oops, AJ, unmute. There you go.
Well, it's particularly rewarding to be asked by Carol and Courtney Knight, partner to help give shape to this Global Minded Earth Day event. And first of all, we all say Earth Day like it's this basic part of our lives. Well, it is now, but it wasn't always. And Earth Day is over 50 years old and celebrated by 1 billion people worldwide. And it's an anchor for all of us focusing attention on our planet, the climate, environment, and all its inhabitants now. And it wasn't always the case. In 1970, a factory could spew black clouds and toxic smokes and dump as much waste into a nearby stream. And it was all perfectly legal. And they couldn't be taken to court to stop it. And there was no EPA, there was no Clean Air Act, there was no Clean Water Act, and there were no legal or regulatory mechanism to protect the environment. So luckily in 1970, Senator Gaylord Nelson created Earth Day, just so that we have a little framework of what we're sitting here doing today. And Dennis Hayes organized 20 million Americans around the world to demonstrate it in different US cities. And it worked. And now we have an EPA, we have the Clean Air Act, we have the Clean Water Act. And as hard as it is we at least have some ground going forward. So fast forward 50 years now, our environmental challenges are different and seemingly larger, and notably global climate change. And so we're rolling ourselves forward, and even if we drag our feet, I think we're going to make some progress. And to that end, that we have a large infusion of energy and outrage from the youth climate movement, and a shot in the arm from voices about environmental injustice that disproportionately are impacted and impacting the BIPOC and economically depressed communities. But I'm hopeful as the voices are rising again. So most important today, I want to introduce Dr. Kyle Whyte, and the person who's going to moderate our panel today. And Kyle was the first person I thought of when I wanted to connect to this panel. I was introduced to Kyle at the University of Michigan, and where I serve on the Dean's Advisory Board for the School of Sustainability, Environment and Sustainability. Kyle had done this presentation to us on his work and research at the university on environmental justice and the moral and political issues concerning policy and indigenous peoples. He's a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, and he was so brilliant in articulating the issues. I was hoping, sorry about that. I was hoping that he'd join us both as a moderator and weigh in a bit as on some of the questions as well. So I know Kyle will tell you his own story and give you some highlights. And so for now, Kyle, take it away.
Thanks so much, AJ, and congratulations on your award from Global Minded. And thanks for all your service for the environment and yeah, for the University of Michigan too. I appreciate you. And really a special Miigwech, thanks for orchestrating this panel. And I just like to convey to our audience that in addition to orchestrating the panel, AJ will join us as a panelist. So I appreciate you're also coming to share along with all of us. Bonjour everybody, bebam kamigaran deshnakas bodwadmi and Dao Shishi Benek Dabinda Grace. I'm Kyle, and I'm Potawatomi and member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation and professor at the University of Michigan. And each of us is going to have a chance to introduce ourselves in the way that we see fit, and I'll guide us all through the introduction process. But we're gonna do it in a particular pattern. And so after I say a few introductory remarks about who I am, I'll then ask each colleague to share. But we thought is that folks would start off and just introduce themselves according to the appropriate protocols and values that they have for this type of event and this type of setting. And then it was, and just to share a bit about what they're passionate about, what their work is about, is relevant to what we're doing here. And then from there, there's a question of how do you tell that story about the spark, if there was a spark that got you going in terms of what you're passionate about in the work, right? What you just described you were passionate about. How do you tell that story? And then lastly, if there was somebody, and we're going to kind of indigenize this a little bit here, it doesn't have to be human. It could be could be non-human, right? If it's somebody or some person or some group or non-human or aspect of the environment in history whose perspective that you'd really want to have, who or what or how would that be? And then from there, we've got a set of great questions for each panelist, and we'll be going in a particular order as well on questions tied to environmental justice and resilience and the big issues that many of our communities and people are facing. So yeah, to begin with, my work is focused in environmental justice, and for me, what I'm passionate about is advancing Indigenous self-determination in environmental justice, especially with regard to climate change, because a lot of non-native folks, they think climate science is a brand new science, but for Indigenous folks, climate science is like one of our oldest sciences. We've been doing it for years, and we have a lot of wisdom. But the problem is that folks cut us out of the big decisions that get made about climate change. Yet we're already adapting to climate change. We're already taking steps to mitigate climate change. We're calling out the issues tied to power, tied to oppression, that are making it so that communities of color, Indigenous people, and other groups are facing greater risks from climate change. And so I've worked with the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians and their climate change program for many years. I've worked with the Sustainable Development Institute at the College of Menominee Nation for over a decade on empowering Indigenous people and their work on climate change. And here in Michigan, I've been active as a founder of the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition. And so mentorship, political action, science, history, these are all areas that shape the work that I do. And I really am wanting there to be a future where Native folks, all of us, right, along with our colleagues in different communities of color, we can experience a clean, healthy, and safe environment where we can practice our cultures and our way of life and be respected as our own governments and sovereigns. And so, yeah, like what got me going in this work, and given what I described, like why would I be in academia? Well, I wasn't originally in academia for academia. Back when I was getting started, I really just wanted to do political work and to take action. And the idea of being a graduate student where you just owed 20 hours a week for a teaching assistantship sound pretty appealing, so I could do the other stuff. Because I actually kind of bought into the idea that academia was for non-native folks, for white folks, right? And that we didn't have a place for our own work. And so it was really, what I often tell people about when I have more time and in more detail was it was some real mentors. I remember when I was living in New York City, a Lumbee artist who's walked on, Lloyd Oxendine, really like kind of shook me up and said, given what our ancestors went through, I mean, if you're going to be in academia, just do what you want, right? Do what your values tell you to. Just, I mean, who cares if they're, if folks don't understand? Just do it. Just do it. And another key moment was when a colleague who's a member of my same tribe, Robin Kimmer, I saw her speak in front of an entirely, like literally like a white male audience, and I was just like, wow, she just is Potawatomi, and she does things the Potawatomi way, and it doesn't matter, the fact that there's a bunch of white guys in the audience. She just does it. And so, those are very powerful. They were kind of mentorship experiences, but they were modeling experiences for me. And, it actually got me thinking I need to project that myself. So I don't think I've gotten that yet, but I'm trying. And so those were big sparks for me. And yeah, if I had that historical perspective, what would it be? And something I'm very fascinated by is, Potawatomi people were Anishinaabe people. And if you look in the record of the treaty making, a lot of our ancestors, they didn't sign the treaties with an X or with the signature, but with the symbols of their clans, like cranes or fish, and so I'm like, wow, what is that? And your signature is the animal or the aspect of the environment or the plant that's you, right? That's you, unapologetically, non-theoretically, that's just you. And so that's a perspective that and historically I'm jealous that I won't get a chance to experience myself. So I'd like to move on to our introductions and start with our next amazing colleague, Kyle Juice.
Hangwa Kyle, hawa hadalase hid good dalase gumgingan yak dangang Kiljus Henudikeang Hikta handlers Luthu Ijin di Yak Junas Wadu Yak I said I was a woman. I was trying to say I was a woman of the Yak Janas, or Yaklanas clan, but it's Yak Janas. So my name is Kiljus, and first of all, I want to say in my language, Xingwai Gudingai La Sangai, Happy Earth Day. So that's kind of a made up thing, but hey, it works. I introduced myself. I always introduced my mother's side, my great-grandmother's, my great-great-great-grandmother's side of the clan. I am a woman of the two-fin killer whale Raven clan from Heidelberg, Alaska. I am like Kyle, like my colleagues sitting here today. I'm going to present one side of myself, one part of my facet of who I am. And that is the director of the Xaadas Kuyaas Foundation. And I sure thought hard about what to talk about today because there's so much and the things are so complicated. So I wanted to put it in a simple way. I wanted to say that I think so highly of all of you because I know there's people listening that are students, there's instructors, there are mentors, mentees, there's people listening, and this audience. I come from a village, Hikta Handlai is the name of my village, that is Heidelberg, Alaska. I'm acknowledging the land that I'm on right now, my homeland, and it's so critical to me in all of my other ventures that I've been on in my life. So I'll get back to what I told you first of all. I wanted to tell you that I think very highly of all of you, and that in our language, it's a language of reciprocity. So to humble ourselves, I'm not supposed to get up and say I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, that's against almost like against ourselves to say that. So what I said to you is that I'm below you, and that I'm beneath you. In what I'm saying is that I recognize you. I recognize all of your endeavors, and I'm really speaking to the status of myself as well. Ayat delang keilka la iwants, and I'm going to say to you some big words today, and I hope that they're well received. Today's subject I come from what's called, I call it my micro world. I live in a village of 400, and I fit every criteria, criteria of Global Minds Ed. We are a low income, we are indigenous, 90% of our community is Haida or Alaska Native. We fit the criteria very beautifully. What we don't fit is the fact that we just don't give up, and that we have made it through this transformative time, and we're coming into this, I'm going to say, absolutely fabulous time in our history. And I think it's because of people like Kyle, people like AJ, the young individuals speaking today. Kyle, when you were talking, I thought about it, and I thought, who are some of my mentors, and there's the Nana Helen Sanderson, my Nana, and Esther Nix, those were my clan mentors. I have sisters out there that lifelong mentor relationships are critical to our existence, because whether you're in academia, I'm an attorney as well. I'm also a Supreme Court justice for something else I do over there. So in those worlds that we walk, there is sometimes it's so lonesome. And then all of a sudden you start pick up traction. And now I see young people that are putting words, writing books, doing things that I'm so fabulously happy over. And I don't know what I can do to hold you up, but I do help people. And they help me. And I think that that's very critical to this relationship. It's just the way we are. It's who we are. And in all of my endeavors, I'm a Haida woman, follow my mother's clan. My father's a Tsimshian Eagle, but you follow your mother. My passion is my language. It's highly endangered. Went back, I got a master's in linguistics. I was like, are you kidding? I'm too old for this. But it wasn't. It was the most beautiful thing I did, because it fit everything together. We can't talk about worldview unless you include our worldview. Our worldview comes through our language. So when I say to you these words, when I say things like, I'm a believer, yada, yada, I'm a believer, I'm telling you something that's 14,000 years old. I'm telling you something that's so relevant to our new president. It's so relevant to who we are. And so I want to take what Kyle and the rest of the collective gathers, and I want to apply it in my village with my language, with the arts, through education. And I have a really quit talking and do the actions. That's who I am. Get it done. Do the actions. We're at that stage right now. So collectively, if anyone's listening out there, I would love to have Native people be a line item on the president's budget. I would love us to be on there. And so be a dreamer, dream big, and continue to dream. And I think I'm a believer already. I believe in us. So I'm taking these dreamers and, like my colleagues today, moving them over into this new column of believers, because when we believe in what we do, we are going to become incredibly powerful, beautiful people that we always were. So I think I talked enough. I talked a lot. So I'm honored, I'm humbled, and I look forward to this very beautiful conversation. And I have people online today that Dr. Wendy Smythe and a couple of the students that are in the sciences, we have them in with language. We have them with our language, because that is critical to our future existence and our health. We need a healthy framework. So when we speak to whoever's listening to us in our wish list, I'll speak to that later. Please remember that we have dedicated our lives to this, and it's real. So how do we make you a believer in what we believe in? So I think that's my mission today. Thank you, Kyle. House Luan, I need to stop now.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And yeah, that wisdom of, how many thousands of years old the language is. I mean, that's a that's an amazing perspective to have. And I appreciate your sharing all those layers, Kyle Juice. I'd like to move to our next valued colleague, Kelsey.
Brittany, thank you. Akwe. I'm Dr. Kelsey Leonard. I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. So that's where I'm zooming in from today on the traditional territories of Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. I also am a citizen of the Shinnecock Nation, and the nation is located on the east end of what is currently called Long Island, New York, but what we know as Paumanok. So a little bit about my work and the passion that I bring to this space of environmental justice. My research is generally centered in the context of transboundary water governance and really trying to, as Kyle was mentioning, shift big transformative valuations around water to also break down binaries and dichotomies of freshwater versus saltwater, and really just think about water and the way in which it connects all of us, both as human beings, but also across our different relatives and relations that are more than human. So that is in large part where my work is grounded, and what brings me to calls of environmental justice is for spaces of water justice and advocacy, inclusive of ocean justice and cloud justice and all the ways in which water manifests in our world. So why do I come to this work, and why is this a part of what I do? Well, I introduced myself and said that I am an enrolled citizen of the Shinnecock Nation, and Shinnecock in our language means people of the shore. So I often think that our ancestors had just this really pronounced understanding of what our responsibilities are to the planet as Shinnecock people, and that's to be shore protectors. It's to ensure that that shore exists for future generations. And so my work as a water scientist in the space of water protection and advocacy for water justice and the larger environmental justice movement is really centered around that call to action and my inherent being as a Shinnecock woman. And so lastly, I think for what Kyle shared, if there is someone human or non-human in history whose perspective you'd like to have, I think for me, particularly coming from a coastal Algonquin Indigenous nation, and a lot of the work I do now as well in the context of water justice is also thinking about climate adaptation and sea level rise. I would really love to be in the mind of a whale, particularly some of our ancient whale relatives that were around prior to the industrialized whaling industry of the 18 and 1900s brought on by settler colonialism. I'd love to know what it was like to be in their space and to be in our waters at that point in time. So thank you to Brittany so much. I'm excited for the remainder of our conversation.
Thanks so much, Kelsey, and that's an amazing perspective to share. And yeah, thanks for all your hard work and all that you do for so many of our communities. Good to have you as part of the conversation. Our next valued colleague is Brittany.
Thanks, Kyle. Hi, everyone. Wherever or whenever you are, I'd like to wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. I'd also like to thank Global Minded and Gwen Smith for asking me to participate today. My name is Brittany Judson, and I use she, her pronouns. And before I continue my introduction, I'd just like to recognize the Cherokee Nation and the Muskogee Creek Nation on whose stolen lands I currently reside on in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. Again, my name is Brittany. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently an independent consultant working primarily with two organizations. Those two are the Partnership for Southern Equity, which is a nonprofit that advances racial equity and shared prosperity across the American South, and Phrenology, which is a social enterprise that helps people reach their full potential through entrepreneurship and economic empowerment. I am very passionate about and focus my work across three main topics: data, racial equity, and sustainability. I'm a proud native of Tampa, Florida, and have roots in the Philippines and Grand Cayman, where both of my immigrant parents are from. So in my work around those three topics, data, racial equity, and sustainability, I have a particular interest in energy burdens and energy efficiency, as well as the impacts of climate change on island nations, given my parents' upbringing in island nations and island nation culture. So with energy burdens, I have done research and work around them, mainly because of my own experiences, my lived experiences with energy burdens growing up. I don't think it is as uncommon as we may think it is for people to have their lights shut off and their water shut off due to issues with our energy infrastructure in the US. And my own experiences with that have led me to the work that I do today. And when I think about my origin story of how I got into this work, I mean, it really all goes back to my family and my parents. Resiliency, grit, and perseverance was truly my breakfast and dinner every single day. My parents persevered and overcame countless obstacles as working class members of the family. And they did that just as their parents did and the parents before them. Like I said, I had a working class upbringing, and the values that both of my parents had experiencing a working class lifestyle or poverty were really fed into my education, into my upbringing, into my values and my philosophy. As far as the person in history or the non-human person in history whose perspective I'd like to have, the first person that came to mind was José Rizal, or his full name is José Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Reyolanda. He is a revolutionary, or was a revolutionary, nationalist, and polymath of the Philippines. So he's often referred to as the national hero and one of the fathers of the Philippines. He was around during the tail end of the Spanish colonial period of the Philippines. If you did not know, the Philippines was occupied by Spain for over 400 years. And he was executed by the Spanish colonial government for his rebellion and revolutions. So I think he's the person I thought of because as I continue to be on this journey of anti-racism and anti-colonialism and understanding my own roots as someone who grew up in America but have origins elsewhere, that's the perspective of someone who really led the work of revolutionizing and liberating a whole group of people who are so near and dear to everything I know in this life.
Thanks so much for all that ancestral wisdom and for sharing your experiences and the work that you're doing that's built on that wisdom and those experiences. Our next valued colleague is AJ. And you will have to unmute one more time.
I'll get it right soon. Well, to my friend Kailjius and everybody, Ditya, I am a believer and I'm humbled to be in the company of everybody here. And I would say that my passion is about contributing to a healthy and thriving planet. And for me, that's deeply rooted in my reverence for nature, which to me is no less than a miracle in itself, and seeking ways for humans to live in balance with nature and peacefully and equitably with ourselves. And all of us on this panel here today and every day are doing our tireless work and with the perseverance, as Brittany said, because things are horribly out of balance. And the vantage point that I see from and that I'll speak from today is what my life's work has been always about, which is communication. And it's my path, it's my passion. My being has been about instigating change. And the two together, communications and change, have led me on an incredible journey. To start, I guess my origin story goes back where so many of us are stated as the most influential, and it's my parents. Who loved and respected nature and the environment. And I think it was my mom's World War II story that I remember her telling me that up in Canada, where she was from, that they saved the gum wrappers and peeled off the aluminum from the wrapper to be made back into airplanes and such. And that was kind of the original recycling action. And I was always out in nature, and similar to Kelsey on Long Island Sound, which was a beautiful and where the estuary was, and I'd be picking out little pond, snails in the pond and walking through the woods. And when I grew up, Long Island Sound was not swimmable. It was so contaminated, and so that was my reality, and so it definitely was instructive to me. And my college education was at the University of Colorado, where I studied environmental science and geology. But after my college years, my professional life took me into a different direction. You know how that is, you kind of go into these little arms of life. And I went into marketing and advertising. And for about 15 years. And it provided me an understanding of how to reach people with messages and bring ideas forward and help organizations and make their mark and to bring ideas and products to life. And so when you're in marketing, you kind of sit in a crow's nest and watch trends intersect. And in 1989, just before the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, many years ago, companies were starting to say, we care. Like they knew they had to show up for a new public criteria about being good. Remember when Tide shrunk its packaging and McDonald's got rid of the styrofoam? There was a big intersection between business and environment. And that's where it all started. And I had this idea that I really wanted to help companies integrate the environment into their corporate policy, their operations, and then their interface with the public. And so that's when I started my communications company that I have today. And we set out to really be that interaction that would help push the lever of change for companies. And so that's where I spend most of my time, usually revolving around big gnarly situations like chemical depots and nuclear sites, and working for the marketing strategy for like the LEED building certification, you know, for that was like the first green building certification. And or working with Indian and Northern Affairs Canada and Nunavut and Northwest Territories to create a sustainability lens and framework for decision making. All of it really revolves around our ability to communicate. And as Kailju said, you know, language matters and how we bring people on board. So my goal is to continue to help get good voices of change out there in the world. And so everybody sitting around here and those of you who are listening, this is our goal and the challenge. From my perspective, I would like to see through the oldest tree on the planet. I have great reverence for trees, and I have a sense that if this tree could talk, what would it tell me? So that's what I would like to see.
Thanks for sharing, AJ, and appreciate learning more about some of those motivations that sparked your career and all the accomplishments that you've had for the sake of protecting our environment. And you know, I'm trying to move on to next parts of the panel, but I'm processing everything that was shared. But just wanted to say I appreciate at the beginning, Kyle Juice's, you know, just showing up respect to everybody, and you know, really suggesting the synergy in what we do. And that's just a great way to start out a conversation and a discussion. So, you know, really to Kyle Juice, thanks for doing that, Miigwech, and we really appreciate those introductory remarks. So in terms of the questions, you know, as our colleague Carol's mentioned at the very beginning, you know, this is about environmental justice and its connection to issues like climate change and resilience. And for people of color, you know, in, you know, professions that, you know, where environmentalism is a key aspect of what we're doing, you know, we're seeing right now in the policy world, you know, especially in the United States, the bringing together of environmental justice and climate change. And in ways that we've not really seen before, at least in terms of what members of the dominant society are doing. You know, I recently joined advisory council for the White House on environmental justice, and actually one of our main tasks is, you know, to actually figure out how to become resilient, but in ways that are environmentally equitable, environmentally just. And literally through the Justice 40 initiative, the Biden-Harris administration is pledging that 40% of all of the upcoming infrastructure investments, including resilient infrastructure, clean water infrastructure, renewable energy, 40% of that multi-billion-dollar package of investment has to benefit communities affected by environmental justice. And so for many of our people in our communities, I mean, this has been a long time coming, but I'm both exuberant about it, but also quite worried. And, you know, as Native people, we have so many different ways of thinking about environmental justice, whether we're using the English language and innovating there, or whether we're using our own languages and just talking in a whole different register, right? That's meaningful to us and our communities. And so our first question has to do with this. And, you know, as part of our panel, I've proposed a particular order of sharing for each question. And despite the fact that everybody has heard about the experiential and educational and professional credentials here, we have decided to stick with a first name basis, as much as it pains me, given how accomplished all of you are. So the first question is, how would addressing and fixing environmental injustice move the dial forward on climate resilience and solutions? And I'm hoping that we'd start off with Brittany, and then move to Kaieljuus, AJ, and then Kelsey. But let me know if you forget the order. but anyways, Brittany, please.
Yeah, Kyle, this is a big question, so I'm a little nervous that I'm the first to answer, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. So when I read that question, one of the first thoughts that came to mind was a shared understanding of history. I think that in order to address and fix environmental injustice, we all got to start on the same page. I think that the way that history is taught through our colonial education system and the way that history is taught even at the kitchen table are not the same across every household and every state and every borderline. And some facets of that is okay, but if we can agree that slavery is a part of our history and we can agree that the colonization of indigenous people is a part of our history, that prevents us from fixing environmental injustice in a significant way. I think when we can honor the gifts and talents of our collective people and its individual members, and we can fully recognize those gifts and talents, we're on the right track to fixing environmental injustice. And what I mean by the gifts and talents is that oftentimes we see different members of the policy community, the nonprofit community, the private sector community propose solutions that aren't community driven or community approved. And in those situations, if the community was not the driving force of that solution, it's not a solution. The people that are closest to the problem have the best answers as to how to solve that problem. And that's, I think, another part of agreeing and accepting shared history and shared values. We have to ensure that these are community-driven solutions in order to address climate resilience and build a resilient future. I also think that part of that work means acknowledging and accepting the wisdom of community, of the unseen, of the underserved, and of the just. So once we can do that, and I don't think it'll be like, okay, it's Monday, we finished the project, we're done. It's definitely continual, iterative, cyclical work. We can envision what I hope to be a Star Trek-esque future where maybe we don't have to spend as much time talking about housing accessibility and transportation accessibility, because those are things that are built into the system, no questions asked. Everyone gets a house, everyone gets food, everyone gets transportation, everyone gets equal access to shared prosperity, because that is what humanity should be about and is about. We just have to tap into that and help others tap into it too.
Amazing, Brittany. And well, I love all the points, but one thing I was just going to say is, yeah, it's not public participation, right? It's community knowledge, wisdom, experiential knowledge and wisdom that comes from our communities. And yeah, I mean, that's what EJ is about, and environmental justice is about. And yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Kaieljuus.
Wow, that was such a great answer. I appreciated that. That is a tough question, and I think it's one that has always been on the radar, and that I agree that it is actually the recognition of the problems, whether it's an institution, whether it's an unhealthy framework that we're working under. We gotta look at that as well. and by acknowledging what the history was. I get really tired of hearing about, oh, that's in the past. You got to learn about it, you have to. That's why I'm encouraging students to write those books, to become the researchers, to become, even though it's a torture session in academia, you have to go through it. It's you or your children. So pick it up, and I think I look at this question as we were forced to turn away from a lot of things, at least in our indigenous communities. You start with children and you start with language. If you want to break someone's spirit, those are the two things that you do. You crack them. And so you put them, people of color have ended up at the bottom of the ladder because of especially the history. So that's so important. I don't know anyone whose grandparents didn't go to boarding school. I'm the first one in my family who didn't go to boarding school. If I could tell you, I don't want to tell you the differences between me and my siblings in that educational endeavor. And so it's hard because nowadays I think that this experiences were relived through this recent administration. So that history, we have an obligation. This is why I love Jewish people. They don't let people forget the history. They don't, and I want to start replicating that. We need to start doing that because it's so important. Then the healing begins. What we're looking at is not, you see, non-Native people look at like it's mine, it's money, it's me. They don't look at it like us, the collective, and I sometimes thought that was a curse, being brought up that way. I used to think, did they curse me or did they bless me? I'm not sure, but I think now it's a blessing because we got to turn it around and start looking at ways to work together, to return to the values that make a community strong. One of our cultural values, one of my clan values, is to excel at everything you do, and don't live up to those stereotypes that non-Indigenous people give to us. I simply don't drink alcohol because that is the #1 stereotype against us. And I just, and it shouldn't even matter, but return to our values, address the stereotypes. And then what I'd like to do in this little portion of my talk is talk about those dreamers, those students, talk about us believers over here, and moving everybody over into becoming this Haga, the visionary for the future. You have to be really dreaming big. So we're not usually given this opportunity, Kyle, so it just really excites me. So I look forward to hearing from the other speakers. But again, I agree, it is the collective whole. We've been pounded on quite hard, and to love and to carry a strength message is very difficult. So I choose, one of my Maori sisters always told me to come out with this line, and I always remember it. I love you and I don't care if you hate me, because that framework has to change. And then our people can move from the patriarchy over into what I call the matriarchy, which is misunderstood. It's equality. That's what it is. And not just for me or my babies, but for everybody, because you're all precious. So yeah, you got me all fired up here now. So, okay, I'm going to move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Kyle Juice. AJ? There we
I'll
go.
get this right now. Well, just sitting and listening to everybody here is, I'm hoping it's as inspiring to the audience as just learning from everybody and the wisdom brought forth here. And, when you said the Jewish people were meaningful to you, I suppose that's my origin and the way I kind of look at life, and I look through there is about learning, and the reward is there, and how we all learn from each other. So I am hopefully just taking this in and being able to transform it. So I love this question. How would fixing environmental injustice move the dial forward on climate resilience and solutions? And um, this to me is about making something good out of something bad. That it's kind of going into the heart of the underlying structure and machinery of environmental injustice that you have all brought forth too, and bringing the wisdom of those who are most affected to the table and being the table and to help bring the wisdom forward to shift our trajectory. And there are always voices that are marginalized, especially on the environment, which has traditionally been a lot of, in the business world, a lot of the white male vision. And there was once when I was at a conference in Canada, and I was kind of doing an Oprah thing for a women's networking luncheon. There were 400 women from around the world at this conference in leadership positions on environment and communications. And I looked out, I was like, how are there so many women in this? And at first, just kind of like today, this was a marginalized and devalued position in environment. Oh, if Brittany will put her in the environment, or AJ will put her in the environment of communications. And we're the ones who populated that for the past 2 decades. And now we're in major leadership positions as women. Maybe the matriarchy, can start to take shape. But I see that coming alive again. And the whole equity and injustice and the movement to actually bring forth these voices is critical. And there's a moment here of opportunity. And I can't see it, the sweet spot of where Global Minded works is to populate a capable and talented pipeline of voices so that we can be instrumental in changing the machinery of the oppression and the injustice that exists out there. So I think that with what you said, Carl, on the infrastructure budget that's going to be spent in communities where it could do the most good, this is the time. And I'm quite excited, though a little hesitant, to look at how real can it be, but I'm ever so hopeful. I'm a believer and a dreamer.
Thanks, AJ. Kelsey?
Wonderful. I second, third, fourth, everything that's been said already by my co-panelists. I think, I was looking at the question, and there are a few things that I want to note. I think firstly, there are two categories of addressing environmental injustice. The first is all of the historical environmental injustice that makes for current environmental injustice problems that we're still dealing with the ramifications of that historical injustice. That needs to be addressed. Before we can even get there, we just need to stop committing contemporary environmental injustice, because it's still ongoing. So we can't fix old problems while we're creating new ones. And so that's a big differentiation that I don't think is often well articulated in this space. It's like, oh, we need to stop environmental injustice. Yes, but it often is spoken about in terms of, oh, that's something that happened a year ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, and it makes for contemporary problems, but it's not something that we're still doing. And yet from being an Indigenous person, I know that that's not the case. I know that there are still ongoing environmental injustices being perpetuated. And so I love that the new administration is taking more bold action to address some of these concerns, but recognizing that they are still a part of the problem in the fact that there are still ongoing environmental injustices happening and being planned to still occur. We think about some of the pipeline proliferation, dam proliferation, so many different spaces in which environmental injustice is projected to continue to occur in our future, that it seems almost insurmountable to address our legacy when we can't stop what's already happening for the future. So I would love to see us be future oriented, stop doing wrong, so we can actually address the legacy. The next thing that I wanted to flag in terms of this conversation is there was almost this point of asking, and it's not specific to the question, it's also specific to the discourse around addressing environmental injustice so that we can create resiliency. Well, if you look at the definition of resiliency, it's the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. I'm so tired of all the difficulties. I'm tired of us creating a world in which we expect resiliency and we expect people to be able to bounce back from hardship. Just stop creating the hardships to begin with. And I think that brings us full circle to this question about how do we address environmental injustice? We stop creating new problems. We stop creating a need for us to have a necessity of climate resiliency and rather be able to create climates that can flourish and that can thrive and that can be holistic and well. You know, I think our notions of well-being have to shift fundamentally if we're actually going to address these big, complex, wicked problems.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. I really appreciate the the paradigm that you shared with us, and shared it really well. That's powerful to me. And checking out the body language of our colleagues here, it sounds like it's pretty resonating and powerful to all of us. And yeah, I mean, all these dimensions that everybody has brought to bear on this conversation, it's huge, and it motivates me tremendously about the importance of our coalitions and of working together and being united in different ways. And one thing I think in just listening to so many of the threads is so many of you have shared examples of how your ancestors, your current communities, how they have succeeded in different ways against just horrible conditions, right? I mean, I think it's always like totally bizarre when folks talk about like our success, but in a way that doesn't really take into account at all the fact that for hundreds of years under the most daunting conditions, we've been able to continue our cultures, continue our support networks, and to this day then are able to talk about and share these responses to questions about justice and equity. And kind of leading into our next question, which talks about stimulating young people. For me, this idea of really honoring our communities and our people's successes, but in terms of what something like a word like success would mean to us, given what we've been through. One of the really inspiring things when I was a graduate student was the first time I visited our relatives at the Menominee Nation. It's in what's currently called Wisconsin, and they're an original people of that land and that territory. And the first thing I noticed is that you're driving along, and it's all sort of kind of recreational agriculture or industrial agriculture. When you get out of Green Bay and head toward the Menominee Nation, but all of a sudden you get to the nation, and it's this amazing biodiverse forest. In fact, you can see it from an aerial shot. It's this block of green. And then to find out, right, that they've been engaged in sustainable forestry, biodiverse forestry, culturally relevant forestry supporting their sovereignty since the 19th century. And if you ask them, right, they've been doing it for thousands of years before that. But as one of the innovations that they had to make when they encountered colonialism and the power of the settler society and that oppression, that they created this model forest, this way of thinking about what does it mean to sustain your culture, your economy, your way of life. And they protected those traditions, they protected those practices. And today they maintain the forest, and it's a huge part of their economy. It's a huge part of their way of life, and it's part of their political sovereignty. And it's something that the people who are from there, that are from the nation, I mean, they're proud of it. It's a cornerstone of who they are, their confidence, their ingenuity, their continuance into the future, given that they're faced every day with extremely, just horrible things, right? I mean, there was a gold and zinc mine recently on the Michigan side of the border that was going to threaten land that was in the Menominee origin story area. I mean, who does that? I mean, right? Like who does that? And the Back 40 mine, which is the term for it, posed a huge existential threat, again, to Menominee people. And so I value greatly the work I've done with the College of Menominee Nation, because it's learning from Indigenous success, but in terms of what success would mean, to us, right? And all those stories of the people, the ancestors, their ingenuity, their leadership, and what they had to do to face these conditions and to persevere and to make it possible for us to be here right now. And so, for me, I think one of the most important things that I feel that I can do, especially in motivating younger folks starting out, is to try to support, connecting people, those opportunities to learn from Indigenous success, from people of color, success, and not just in a one-off sense, but in a deep historic sense. And so our question coming up is, for all of our colleagues here, is as a leader, in environmental justice, what would you do to stimulate young people's educational opportunities and careers to contribute to positive environmental change? We have a different order. So our order for this, we're going to begin with Kelsey, and then we will move to Brittany, and then Xaadas and AJ. Kelsey.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm blanking on exactly who maybe shared this with me. I think it's just been a part of my life, but I feel like it's almost a testament to an experience that is common for Indigenous peoples, particularly to Turtle Island. But the advice is, if you are, you as an Indigenous leader are going into a space of decision making, a space of governance, a space of environmental protection, and bring a youth with you, bring a young person with you. Particularly, it doesn't have to be a young person who's like the best student. It could be, but it's just a young person, and allow for them to have these new experiences, these experiential learning opportunities, on the ground with you in leadership, and that will ignite a spark in them. And I know that from my own personal experience. I had adults and mentors who allowed me to be that fly on the wall in rooms where they were making, really big decisions for the future of our nation, but then also for the larger national future of Indian country. And that was very formative. And it led me also then to take on leadership roles. And that's sort of my other piece of advice, is to support, build, create new spaces through which youth can enact their own advocacy. And for me, that was in the space of Native youth organizations, and in particular, United National Indian Tribal Youth. And I went into leadership roles with that organization that led me to a lot of different spaces than I'd ever been in before, but also gave me the opportunity to network and build relationships with Indigenous youth from across the United States and other parts of the world. And I think those are the opportunities that we need to continue to make available to young people, and to ensure that they are available, into the future. And so I'm a really strong advocate for youth organizations and for youth leadership. I don't think that there is something innate about your age that gives you more insight and wisdom into the world. I think that in some instances, yes, that longevity, does come with a certain perspective. But I think that that youthfulness as well comes with a particular level of perspective and insight that we shouldn't push away, we should embrace.
Those are awesome points, Kelsey. And you really kind of sparked, for me, this experience I've had, like comparing when I'm like working directly or just being directly in, tribal communities, and then like, I don't know, at my university campus or at a government agency office, and really just the age segregation in the dominant society. And it's bizarre, right? Because it's like these key decision-making contexts, right? Whether it's a university administrative office or particular office in a government agency. It's just a very particular kind of age group or training or education. And how dare somebody bring a younger person in, or a child, or somebody who's retired, or somebody who's more elderly than the average age of the person that is working in that that context. Yeah, checked out a lot of my experience. I appreciate how also some of those ideas you mentioned about mentorship were ones that you benefited from in your own experiences. Fantastic. Brittany?
I think Kelsey said earlier to stop creating new problems. And I think that's probably a really good framework to start from when it comes to young people. Because if we see young people as the new generation and the upcoming generation, then we also have to value them as the next entity that should grow up and exist without problems. So I think one thing that stood out to me in response to this question was the lack of financial capital to youth-led groups, youth-led organizations. That's almost always the first thing that comes to mind. I have seen so many instances as a self-identified young person myself of lots of talk and very little action. The words of support from various members of the community across ages are always appreciated, but it can't be the end all be all. If you say that you support us and you believe in us, I want to see the receipt. Put the money where your mouth is. And I think that it's easy to go to organizations that are established, the ones that we recognize and say, they're doing youth-led work. But oftentimes the youth-led work that is most impactful is the one that you don't see and think of right away. So I encourage folks to challenge what is the first organization that comes to mind and look a little deeper. Go to the third page of Google and see what you can find in terms of youth-led work. And as an example of that, I'm part of a youth-led organization called the Metro Atlanta Youth Energy Corps, and our focus is around energy burdens in the metro area and being energy advocates. And I don't think that we're necessarily like a Sierra Club or a Nature Conservancy, but I think that we're doing incredible work. And we've had lots of people say a lot, but not do a lot in terms of supporting us. I also think that there are tools that more established organizations with financial capital and lots of wisdom, there are tools that they can provide to young people, like access to physical space, so young people can build community with each other, access to platforms and tools that they use, and of course, sharing their wisdom to young people and allowing them to take the wisdom from young people as well. It's definitely not a one-way street, it's two-way, and it's important that we remember these are tools that we need to reciprocate with one another. I think Kelsey also said that you don't have to be a person that's the best student when you decide to bring someone into the room with you. And that really struck a chord with me, because when we look at our educational institutions and systems, especially in higher ed, oftentimes financial capital in terms of scholarships go to the most excellent student with the most excellent GPA. But that fails to recognize how our current system, our current unjust system of oppression, makes it very difficult to be the most excellent student with the best GPA. And excellency, or rather perfection, is a mindset that fails to recognize growth. Anyone can grow. Perfection is not possible for any one of us. Excellence is. And so when you decide to look at someone based on their journey versus their final GPA, you allow yourself to see them as a whole human being, not what they've produced and how they can benefit you and your clout. And then the last thing I want to say is, I learned the term sponsorship a few years back, and I think that really changed the way that I look at the word mentorship. You can choose to be a mentor to someone and give them wisdom and give them advice, or you can choose to be a sponsor, which means to bring them into the room and to the table where important decisions are made. And I am so blessed and so grateful to have had many sponsors in my life. I think that this goes back to the idea that you can't just say something and feel content with it. You have to really do something and put your money where your mouth is. And that includes in your power, in your positional power, how can you elevate someone else, and not just by giving them your power, but by putting them in your power. And yeah, actually, there's one more thing I want to say. Consider the non-traditional. I think also in the work of young people, there, of course, are young people who are taking a traditional route to education and careers. They graduate from high school, they go to college, they graduate from college, they go to work. But so many people in the US and across the world take breaks, go enlist in the military, have kids, have interruptions, and that's normal. That's a part of life. That's traditional, not the other version. And so, you know, I think that goes back to who you decide to bring into the room. You must recognize that they should be a reflection of what is normalcy, which is the non-traditional.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. Some of the things you're describing are just things that I experience every day, and it's been so frustrating, in some of these careers, and I hope the professionals and the emerging professionals that are plugged into Global Minded are taking this very seriously, that these jobs, whether you're in philanthropy or academia or government or private industry, over time, right, we strive for tenure or for other types of job security. But once you get to that point, you all of a sudden become this person that accepts like the worst status quos. You don't value action, constantly apologizing or covering up. And it's now that I've been in my job for a bit, I've seen other people have that transition where I knew them at an earlier stage. And it's like, on one, I'm very proud that they make it to the next parts of their profession, but then look what it turns us into. From your perspective, just seeing how horrible that is, right, for people that don't take action and don't act on behalf of others and have no apology or excuse for that. I mean, just literally none. Yet they're at a time where they could do that unapologetically. They could, and then with these things about people's qualifications, and again, English really fails us as a language, right? Because I mean, these terms like success are just so problematic because I've been in those cases, whether it's with students or for jobs with the organizations that I'm part of, where somebody's looking at two candidate profiles and somebody who had all the privileges, all the time in the space just to focus on grades. And then somebody with 30 years of grassroots experience making change, and that person, right, with the equivalent of 6 PhDs in actual experience, it's not clear how to evaluate them. And with students as well, oftentimes these life factors, we look at them as detractors to success, but no, those are success. I mean, to actually be somebody that has surmounted those obstacles, has negotiated them, has surmounted them, that is the experience, that is the qualification. Those are the credentials. And how far away are we, and especially in universities, but other institutions, from honoring that? Yet so many folks in universities are among the most sanctimonious in terms of their liberal views or political views, yet completely behind on the areas that you really brilliantly put out before us, Brittany. So we appreciate your sharing. And I'd like to check in with Kyle Juice.
Hangwa, I like what Brittany said as well. I think I would take it a step further, and I'm going to give a couple examples. I was recently elected to a regional corporation board, and one of the questions they asked me was, you used to be a radical against this because of this and this and this and that, and why do you want to do this now? And I said, well, I never changed over the years. I said, I wouldn't actually sit on that board. I would not sit on that board if it didn't honor my cultural values. And I finally saw that change coming around. So I'll use that first example of the day that I got elected. And I called one of my mentees and I told her, you're going to go into training now because I'm not doing this any more than X amount of time. And I'm not going to perpetuate this. I'm going to die in this seat because it brings me money. So the message is, when I was elected to that sent a huge message to the world. And there was 7 women. We became a majority of the board for the first time, I think, in any village corporation, a regional corporation, certainly. So the message is really timely. And it was all about what I've always done, and try to take what your values are and put those into the policies. So when you're making those decisions, that you're going to make decisions that are based on your love of the land, or your respect, your reciprocal respect for the earth, and that those decisions have priority over putting money in the pockets. And although that's important, that is important. People have to eat, and balancing that out. Like what Kyle says, you get in there and you're like, am I part of that? And you're not, because you're looking at it as a healthy framework for the first time. And it's uncomfortable. I've been beat up plenty of times, and, I'm a tough Nana. I just hang in there and just continue to take it a step further. And so, so I know there's a young woman coming up behind me that, regardless of whether she takes that seat or not, she's still somebody I'm teaching and working with, and respect and love. And she's going to go places because I believe in her. So that's one example that's based on our cultural values. But another one is I look at the trust that it takes. Don't forget, when you get beat up in that educational system, I'm a graduate. I have advanced degrees, but the majority of my friends in the village here didn't make it through high school because their parents' experiences were horrifying, or their great grandparents' experiences were horrifying. And then there's recognition of that, and all of a sudden you've got elders who can't speak our language, know our cultures, and there's kids that are craving it. So those gaps have to get filled in by us. And so taking the young people along with us, don't forget to teach them the intrinsic beauty of who they are, and then they can carry that whatever comes at them. In Heidelberg, in my village, we started 10 years ago a grassroots Xaadas Kuyaas Foundation, and that means our precious Haida words. That's what it means. Our mission is to uphold to promote, perpetuate, and to hang on to our culture, our values, our language, the beautiful things. And part of that is apprenticeships. The art is part of our being. And one thing that in a menteeship, like any traditional apprenticeship, you want that student to be better than you. And we do have a young carver, TJ Young, one of our carvers in our village, and he told me, I wish somebody had showed me. He's a master carver, went to Canada under Robert Davidson. He's world class. And that young man, he said to me, Kuyaas, I want to make my students who if I can set up systems to teach, I want them to be better than me. I want them at a younger age to be better. So that's how I view mentoring. It's a lifelong thing. And I also have to look at people who want to engage. Sometimes we ought to work on our healing first before we can get into this economic insanity that we try so hard to build. We have to look at that healthy framework. Otherwise, we're doing this work for nothing. So, it's a really delicate balance. And but building trust, taking it home, bringing it back. That was what our mission was. Wendy went out, I call her a sassy Haida scientist. She went out and she came home. It took her a decade to build trust. I mean, we're from here, but if you leave and get educated, watch out, because you have to rebuild that trust, and that you have to rebuild those relationships. Now at this wider level that we're experiencing, and we're understanding the big world out there, we want to bring this home. So when these opportunities are coming up, that we're the ones that can say we were smart enough to go out and show them that we just built a hydro plant. We just did this, we just did that. How do we bring those dollars back to our home? We've planned, we've built the trust, we've done all the work. We need the money and the infrastructure. I mean, we need the same things that the bigger communities need, that COVID has brought our reality to the whole world. And so water, the things that are sacred, we don't, we all have water issues. Our drinking water here in the villages in Alaska, every village has those issues. The lack of infrastructure, we struggle to do these things. I want things to be deregulated so that we can be like the airlines, deregulate us so that we can start to function and be the best that we can. Anyway, I think I got off point there, but I think Brittany's point about take it a step further, and it is time for action. It's a call for action, and make that call loud and make it so that it's full of reciprocity. So all that we've given over these years is going to start to come back to us, and in a good way. So yeah, thank you. Great question, Kyle. The other last thing is I want a tribal college on my island that has science. It has a room for engineers, whatever it takes to build green projects. I want our people to know that they are the scientists, they are the engineers, they are the educators, and we are that. And teaching them that as you professionals out there, as you become a professional, go home and teach our young people like Wendy did. Scientists aren't white men. Scientists can be brown babies that are raised in the village. She taught our kids that, and I'm forever grateful for that. So continue to spread the message, and thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Kyle. And thank you, Brittany. That was a great answer.
Yeah, well, Kyle's just, I really appreciate that short, period of time, how much you wove together the fabric, culturally, historically, politically, about why mentorship and supporting people matters to our communities, and helped me to further understand some of the great points that Kelsey and Brittany shared. And AJ.
Well, I would echo the idea of inspiration that everybody has talked to today, and whether it's in mentorship or sponsorship, all of us and everyone around us starts in their field or on their life path because somebody inspired them about something aside from a need. And sometimes that's about seeing yourself in somebody. So as Kyle just said, scientists aren't just white men. They can be brown babies. They could be all kinds of people. We have to be able to surround ourselves with the reality of and bring that closer to people. And I'm a big proponent of apprenticeship, and I think that word came out today, is that there's a hands-on, there's a caring, there's a transfer of knowledge and a sharing, and to help somebody become even better than you are at something. And so I think there was kind of the last of the apprenticeship generation went away a little while ago, and I'm hoping that it's being reborn because there is a need. As crappy as things are out there, some days I'm a kind of an optimistic fatalist. I think we're really screwed in so many ways, but out of this tough time can arise a renaissance of sorts. And hopefully that it restructures itself kind of as a well-being economy. And like, we should not build back and train and educate everybody to build back what was, even build back better on that same train. Listening to everyone here and taking it needs to have a completely different shape and form. And I think we can get there by giving opportunities, obviously, to so many of the disenfranchised groups who've been left out of the story here. So one is the inspiration piece and the apprenticeship part. Being one that never graduated college, I was not a traditional student. It didn't totally work for me, but in my own way became successful at what I did. And I always see life as kind of, we go around with this backpack on in everything we do, whether it could be a cooking class, it could be that I'm creating a advertising campaign, or when I headed chainsaw crews for the Forest Service, or everything that we're doing in the village or around, it goes into our backpack. And the idea, I think, ultimately is to, when you're like at a campsite and you have a problem, you empty out your backpack and you see what you have in it to find a new solution. I think we need to put things together differently and combine the unusual things in our lives to give and help kids understand that they are this unique package, and they can take all these parts and pieces and kind of go in these different directions. And that being a creative strategist for themselves is important. And yesterday's session talked about education and the importance of that. And one, that's the inspiration, but also having fun learning, because you get hooked on a new trajectory when you do that. One of the fun things that I did, I'm always looking for the place for maximum impact out in the world. And I got frustrated that working with corporations and NGOs and the government was so slow on environmental stuff. And it's like, what could you do for maximum impact? And I took a look at like the generation that grew up on Big Bird and Barney, and they sit and get inspired by these characters. Meanwhile, they're singing and dancing. And I said, okay, what if you could create the next children's icon all about taking care of yourself and the world around you? And so when you're bored, you can take a look at this character we created called Big Green Rabbit. But it taught me a lot about how kids engage and take things in and want to be part of something. And we had this little section of kids on the street, and we would go and interview the kids and ask them these words, like, what is ecology? And kids who really never heard that word. He says, well, it's when you graduate from college, or all these different things that they would say and how they interpret the world, that we get to learn from them and they get to lead us. But there's a joyousness. And I'm hoping that this topic, which is heavy, and it's burdensome, we carry it, and it's complex as to what everybody's saying, comes alive in a different way and allows our children and youth to enter and be driven by the desire to change. And they're frothing at the mouth. I just get this sense there's change on the horizon. So that activates me to open up as many opportunities that I can to be a mentor or a sponsor, or to just chime in wherever.
Thanks so much for sharing those experiences and ideas and philosophies, AJ. It's really appreciated. And we've got one more question, and I think for our last question, we'll simultaneously treat it as a brief parting thing to say to the current and to the future audience. And the question is, what are some of the brightest innovations happening in your profession or work to lead us to a better future? And I think each of us could just speak super briefly to that in a way that properly sends off our audience, and for me, right, oftentimes for a lot of tribes, right, we've been caught up in these, conflicts about, our traditions versus the, traditions of the dominant society. And I've really been inspired by how tribes just turn that on its head. So for example, human rights versus protecting the environment. And a lot of tribes are saying, wait a minute, why can't the environment have rights? Why can't rivers have rights? Why can't nature have rights? Or tribes are consulted by the federal government. Well, why can't tribes organize their own consultation where the federal government is the stakeholder, the corporations are the stakeholder? And those are all just their shifts, their perspective changes, but they go a long way. And we're seeing people follow up with the governance system for how to operate that difference in perspective. And so for our order of panelists, we'll start with our brief examples of innovations and kind of an ascending off sense with AJ, then Kelsey, then Kyle Juice, then Brittany. AJ?
Well, in the briefest is the innovations in my field are actually sometimes the newest is the oldest. And I think that there's an opportunity to actually get back to what we were talking about, to be able to communicate what Kailjius worked so hard on and establishing and saving languages and interacting on a really basic level. So communications at a community level, listening to new people in the equation. So that's, I see that there's kind of breakthroughs of that happening. Simultaneously, we have this jettisoning of Elon Musk, and all the communication platforms that are coming in. And, together, I'm hopeful that there is a facilitation of a new world, because I think communications for me is greasing the wheels of change.
Thank you, AJ. Kelsey?
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And to all of the panelists, it's been a really wonderful conversation today. Kyle, you stole my line. So I will just second and add to the chorus that I am, really inspired and innovative by what tribes are doing. Tribes and other Indigenous nations, First Nations as well, with where I am in Canada, for putting forward Earth Law. And really, I feel like it's a reclamation of our old ways and of Indigenous legal systems, and just kind of saying, hey, we're here, we've been here for millennia, and it's time for you to also recognize what we have for millennia, and that is that nature has rights, and there are a whole system of rights and responsibilities that can be enshrined within the legal system outside of just property rights. And so that, to me, is really exciting when we think about what is the future of environmental justice around the planet. And then I think maybe the last thing I will leave you with in terms of innovation is having role models that look like you, that come from communities that you come from, that can at least be able to translate their science to your community and to the broader folks that you have accountability towards. And we have such a unique history of hidden figures, so I don't want to discount the many folks that have blazed, a path for all of us that are now filling these spaces today and that will fill these spaces in the future. But, the call to action, even sort of the roll call of, BIPOC scientists that have happened in the past year over social media, it's just been so inspiring to just see so many folks that are doing really great work that often are hidden figures in the space of environmental science. And I just can't wait to see more of these spaces moving forward.
Wonderful, Kelsey. Kailjius?
Oh my gosh, I just love what you said. That was so strong. I just love it. I think that I really loved what Kelsey said about the role models, because one of the strongest impacts in my mind ever was having Professor Zuni Cruz, a Pueblo woman, come out, and she was one of my first law professors. And I almost fainted. I was like, that it's still strong in my mind the day I saw that. She went for tenure and I was the one in there fighting for her. And there was, so I just think that is so powerful. It's a message that, it's getting away from the bow down mentality where we can do these things ourselves, even if we make mistakes. We're not perfect, but that, and then also I just want to say our own heroes, our own heroines, whatever you call them. But I think there's a generation that was so hurt. I like to always acknowledge them, and I call them the Red Panther Generation. And they should have been as active as our brothers in the Black Panther movement for community, but they weren't. My mother was a Red Panther, and if she had found her calling and her and what you have opportunity to find today, be the Red Panther for your mothers, for those who hurt so badly and didn't get to live to see this day. So continue it on, whatever your panther color is, if it's a rainbow panther, go for it. But just continue to march forward with your head held high. And if you can do that, then we have won. And this is a major victory. This is a good time for us. Thank you, everybody. I so enjoyed this day. Hawa.
Thank you, Miigwech, Kyle Juice. Brittany?
Okay, real quick, finish line. Two things. I think something that's really innovative that I try to practice myself and I've watched other practice is acts of apology and forgiveness. I believe that none of us have all of the answers. And when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and accountable, we practice by saying, I am sorry for when we've done something wrong. And I forgive you when we feel that someone else has done something wrong, but would like to apologize. And I think that seems basic, but it's really, really hard to do and important in this work. And then the second thing that I think is innovative, and this goes back to what AJ said about sometimes the newest is the oldest, is the idea and practice of the bayanihan, which is a Filipino word that literally means being in a home. And it was a practice that is still done today and has been done for generations of picking up a house, having a huge group of people pick up a house and physically move it to another location. So the idea there is that in order to accomplish anything, we can't do it without each other. And community is the core of everything that we do. If we believe in anything that attaches itself to the individual, it won't help us accomplish our shared collective goal. So I encourage everyone to think about the bayanihan in their work and who their community is and how they help them get to their goals.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Hey, it's been awesome hanging out with you all. Such a privilege for me. And yeah, I look forward to keeping the relationality going and, keeping up with our networks. And I just want to send everybody off with my very best wishes.
Thank you so much, Kyle. And I'm just going to say a couple other little words about Earth Week. First of all, thanks to each of you. And when AJ was talking about the backpack, I was thinking it's our medicine bundle. Like we all have our medicine, we can all use it at this time. And the uncommon collaborators, the mentors, the sponsors, and I don't know if you guys get our newsletter, but almost every day we have role models of people who are first gen to college, are diverse in all kinds of ways. And they are the people, their living stories are on those pages every day for students who may not see that kind of diversity, in what they're doing. So if you all aren't part of that, or students that could be a part of it, it's part of telling the story. And we hope to tell the story of each of you in the coming months in that newsletter. So want you to know that. And then tomorrow there is a youth panel with youth from around the world with Dr. Ash Pachari, who runs an organization called Protect Our Planet. And it's a whole movement. So want to just share that we definitely value the voice of students. We know we can't figure out anything without young people at the table with us. And that's the whole other, type of making sure that people are included and that their voice matters. And so thanks to all of you. It was incredible spending this time with you. And I hope next June, you guys will be able to come to Denver in person and that we can all meet. You can meet all the people from yesterday's panel and tomorrow's panel, and we can really build this environmental justice community. So thank you to everybody, to Kyle and AJ and Kale Juice, Brittany, Kelsey. It's been incredible spending time with you, and thank you for prioritizing this on Earth Day. We'll send you all the links so you'll have that and can share it. And we'll have it also in tomorrow's newsletter. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
AJ, they were amazing.
Oh, she just left. I was gonna say
Darn it,
something.
I was gonna see if she'd stay. Shoot.
Oh well.
Ah, well.
All right, see you in a minute.